Well, hello everyone. It is that Weems guy back here for yet another episode. We missed last week, but we're here this week, and I have a crazy work schedule coming up over the next few weeks that includes uh, a good bit of drive time and some night work. So hopefully, we'll be able to get episodes out over the next few weeks. But today, returning frequent guest who was kind of on a hiatus for a while, but now he's back. Uh, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks
Think this is like
recently?
3 weeks now
Yeah,
from the
there
last
we
one.
go. You probably recognize that voice as BrYan Eastridge, half of American Fighting Revolver. How you doing, Ryan?
Well, man, just I finally hit a slowdown. I got caught up with everything, and everything kind of uh, pumped the brakes. And when you sent the message earlier, it was like, well, I can do laundry, or I can, wax intellectual for an hour or so.
Yeah, well, I must know that at least I still have more draw than laundry does.
By a fair margin. It was a distant second. Uh,
Yeah. When Brian was on a few weeks ago, we kind of talked about some things going on in the industry. And we're kind of going to continue on that theme and then see where it goes because we've really got no plan for this episode. It's just going to basically be us yammering for an hour or so. Um, But one of the things Brian thought would be interesting would be what's old is new again. And he's talking about some of the rifle cartridges that are being introduced as new, but they're actually kind of repackaging of things we've had previously. Go ahead, Brian.
yeah. So this was all born out of a conversation I had with a gent here named Will Andrews, which if you're a shooter in Oklahoma, like who doesn't know Will?
Yeah.
And every time I see him, we dive into the intellectual rabbit hole about how new stuff and old stuff is now cool again, and then we've rebranded some things that had already been developed and created, but now with a little sexier cartridge or but they we have he made the statement that we haven't really had an advancement since like 100 years ago. That everything just kind of it changes shape a little bit, but performance
Mhm.
wise it kind of does the same stuff. And if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole yourself, just go into Google, pick a cartridge or a bullet diameter and a cartridge, and it's already been done. It doesn't matter what combination you think of, it's pretty well already been done. Uh, but now with the advent of like 6.8 SPC and some of the others, it's kind of open to that wildcat, dare I say, wildcat, chasing performance and different bullet designs to kind of a different crowd. And the manufacturers are doing the wildcatting for us. So it's a really it's a cool time, but it's also if we don't remember if we don't remember that like it's really not new. It's just the way we're packaging it or the way we're able to fit it into certain platforms is new. So, and that's been an interesting dive I've had, and it all kicked off uh, when Lipsy's released the Alaskan bush rifle that I picked one up. I got it for my birthday, but it's in 35 Wheeling, and that was one that just sat over in the on the sidelines for the better part of like 3 decades. But the really tuned in people were all over it, and it's 30-06 necked up to 358. So, but that's what kicked it off for me on the rifle side again, diving back into what's out there, what's new, what are people or what are the industry focusing on, and it's a real rebirth of some vintage cartridges that kind of went away for 50 years.
It's funny if you look back, it's like turn of the 20th century. I'm talking 1900s going in, or excuse me, 1800s going into the 1900s. Um, there were a lot of cartridges that were around back then that when the Great War came along and then World War II came along, just died and went away. and never have made a comeback. It seems like, we had to end production of a lot of things to concentrate on military production. And then after that need was over, it's like, okay, well, we're just never going to bring those back. One, for instance, being the 351 Winchester or 351 SLR, whichever one you want to call it. And there was a great rifle that Winchester made, the 1907 Winchester. That was fantastic rifle. I go on one on patrol with one as my patrol rifle right now. Um, Probably the only modern reference to it would be if you ever watched that show on AMC called The Sun. Uh, Pierce Brosnan's character carried a 1907 Winchester. Um, it actually saw some military service in the Great War, but that's one of those cartridges that just went away. And you're saying it's making a comeback, but in another form.
Yeah, if you look at it, like my dad went through a period where he was collecting 1907s and then uh, the Model 8 and 81
Mhm.
Remingtons, which stuck around a fair time.
Mhm.
But there were cartridges based in both of those that kind of went away, and the Winchesters were more like straight wall,
Mhm.
and the Browning designs or Remingtons had a lot more tapered semi-auto cartridge. And if you look at like the 1908s and the 81s, they're kind of like a Browning BAR or something scaled down. So, but like the 351 SLR, you can find ammunition for it, but you can't find brass, you can't find components. If you do, they command a premium. And but they introduced the 360 Buckhammer, which if you look at it, it's a 35 caliber, basically straight wall semi-auto. Uh, you know, uh, in a platform or in a cartridge, you could run in a semi-auto. So I thought, man, and if you look at them ballistically side by side, there's not a whole lot of difference other than maybe you gain 100 or 150 feet per second on the modern cartridge because we've got more than one powder to load it with now. So,
Yeah.
but that was one example. And then I dove down the 1907 rabbit hole and they did a family of cartridges, the 401 SLR. Well, there's uh, 400 Legend, I think it is now. It's
Mhm.
they're so similar. It's like, huh, well, maybe they were on to something. And then it just,
Yeah.
you know, with World War One, the '03 Springfield just kind of dominated, which spawned into the Winchester 70, the Remington 700, uh, the Ruger Model 77. I mean, they're all kind of based in that
Mhm.
family for bolt guns. And the semi-auto thing didn't really take hold for another several decades. But you know, it, it's it's we're just like repackaging the same performance and tech with better bullets, a little better powder, and maybe a little more efficient cartridge design. So
I guess you could throw the 350 Legend into that same category.
yeah, real similar. The 350 Legend is like it's like 357 maximum with a 355 bullet. So and that's been a really popular cartridge for some of the straight wall states. And then of course 360 Buckhammer kind of mirrors that 351 SLR. It gets into the rifle category pretty solid. Um, and then 400 Legend really mimics 401 SLR. So um, and the other one that I'm seeing is like 10 millimeter has made a
Yeah.
huge comeback. It's more popular now than 20 years ago when people said it's popular again.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then variations off of that will come along, but I'm just seeing this real trend where people are like, "Oh, look at this new amazing cartridge, the 6 millimeter arc." I'm like, "Yeah, it's been around like 75 years. Guys were just making it themselves." Uh, all the bench rest titles are still held by a cartridge that is effectively 6 arc. They changed the shoulder dimension a bit, but
Hmm.
Um, but that's been it all goes back to my conversation with Will, where he said we haven't done anything innovative in 100 years. We just repackaged it. So, um, 253,000 Savage. Who'd have thought? That cartridge was so far ahead of its time, and to be able to put it in a lever gun or a semi-auto, like wow, that's it's turn of the century stuff, and they were cracking 3,000 feet per second with it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, there seems to be a whole family of rifle cartridges that are, let's see how we can take these old cartridges, the performance of those, and then make them work in an AR platform.
Yeah, and
And I
I
think that's
think
where you get but that's where you get like 350 Legend. That's where you get some of these others. Just like, all right, America took a vote and the AR platform won. Now let's make every conceivable possible rifle niche that we need to make it work in an AR platform.
yeah, and if you go back to the first Great War,
Yeah.
it was let's see what we can make in this Mauser pattern action work
Mhm.
because that was like America's rifle at that point, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of stopped in the late 40s and 50s after World War II with um, like the M14, the M1A1, and the
Mm.
M1 carbine. They never really took a foothold the way that the bolt guns previous to that did. Um, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it didn't people didn't your local gunsmith didn't go, well, let's neck that 30 carbine down to 22 and see what it'll do. You
Yeah.
didn't have that kind of wildcatting with those platforms. Whereas, you know, anybody with what amounts to a pipe wrench can play around with an AR, right? So, uh, a pipe wrench and a punch, you can get a long ways to doing some experimentation. And but yeah, you're right. And the last 20 years, the AR platform has taken that is America's rifle now. Um, so yeah, now and I think now that the kind of the sales have tapered off on them a bit, uh, the race to the $400 AR, that formula has been cracked. So now they're playing with the different cartridges in a lot more abundance than they did, say, 20 years ago. And 6.8 SPC and 6.5 Grendel, and then in the
Mm.
longer action AR-10 platforms, 6.5 Creedmoor and things like that. Um, Now they're really pushing that into the smaller platforms, and that's 224 Valkyrie, things like that. We've just never really seen it quite like this. So, and I like it. I mean, I think it's interesting, and the the enthusiast in me wants to go find an old 1907, but the realist in me goes, yeah, it's going to be a neat wall hanger, but I'm never going to do,
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot the 3 rounds I have and reload for them. Um, and but there's a couple that have stuck around. 35 Remington stuck
Mhm.
around, and that one was kind
Barely.
of yeah, against all odds, it's still
Yeah.
around. Um, Matter of fact, I'm looking at a bag of high desert uh, 35 Remington ammo sitting in the corner that I've been meaning to test for months. I was trying to think of some others. I mean, 30-30 Winchester's
Yeah.
been around for decades, but now we're starting to have some plays on that one again. So it's it's a cool time, but
Yeah.
and I'm hoping for is this cartridge modernization, and one, it is a bit of a sign of boredom industry wide, but what I'm hoping it does is inspire some of the people that are shooting these cartridges to kind of look back in history and go find some of those old cool guns. And you know the the 1907 and the Model 8 and 18 Remingtons, man, that was high tech for turn of the
Yeah.
century. I mean, that was rock. That's I think Clint Smith said it's like going from a horse and buggy to piloting the spaceship. When you look at how quickly the designs morphed
Yeah.
in right before World War One.
Well, you look at the 30-30, and when it came along, it's like this is going to be we're going to build a rifle for this new smokeless powder, and along comes the Winchester 94, and developed by or designed by none other than John Moses Browning, and he develops the 94 like again for this new smokeless powder cartridge that's going to come on. Marlin comes out eventually with the 336 much later on. Um, but that cartridge fit a niche and basically dominated the Southeast, and to a large part some of the Midwest for decades. And it has only hung on, in my opinion, just because of sheer numbers that it was out there. Um,
Millions.
yeah, you like boys like me growing up, everybody had a 30-30. And it was America's rifle for the longest time. And unfortunately, what it costs to produce one now and to produce one in quality, quite frankly, you can get a quality AR for much less money, configured exactly like you want it configured. And you can play Barbie by getting another upper and just dropping it right on there and have completely different performance windows out of it. I had multiple 5.56 ARs, and I wanted something with a little more punch to it. And we did a commercial for YHM. And by the way, YHM guys, if you listen to this, still love my rifle. Um, Everyone who participated in the commercial got a rifle. At the time, they were making 5.56, 300 blackout, and 6.8 SPC rifles. This was YHM. And I told them, like, look, I don't want a 5.56 because I've already got multiples of those. Those guys tried to talk, the Graham brothers tried to talk me into the 6.8 SPC. And back then, this new, the 300 blackout was bubbling under the surface, and like it was predicted to be the next big thing, like it was going to bust out. FBI HRT was testing it about adopting it in a SCAR with a multi-position gas system, so it could switch back and forth easily from subsonic to sonic cartridges, depending on their mission. Some other things like that, and I said, no, 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 give me the 300 blackout. Now, of all the AR pattern rifles that I have, that YHM and 300 blackout's my favorite. Um, and I love the rifle. Unfortunately, the 300 blackout cartridge did not give me what I needed. It's great for 100 yards and in. And I had opportunity back then. I was going to a property in the neighboring county that was just overrun by feral hogs. But we had places where you could get shots up to 200, 250 yards. And the 300 blackout just didn't have enough punch for it. And so I ended up buying a 6.5 Grendel American Ranch, and that fits every niche that I needed for that. For something more than 5.56. Well, now I have this rifle that I really love the rifle, but I don't really have much use for the cartridge sitting around. But
Yeah.
if I had listened to the Graham brothers and took the 6.58 SPC, I would have never had the need to buy the 6.5 Grendel.
Yeah. The Grendel is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
You got to love the small action AR-15
Mhm.
action that with a 20-inch barrel. You got if you
Mhm.
stretch the barrel out, that's the kicker. Um, my dad's got one with a 24-inch barrel. That gun doesn't even start to get challenging till 600 yards. It's like, eh. And it's I we've decked a lot of feral hogs with. And another thing I love is Hornady cartridges. If Hornady signs on and backs it, somebody said this the other day, that cartridge will be around. They'll continue to produce ammo for it. Um, and they really got in behind the 6.5 Creedmoor and the 6.5 Grendel. And uh, that's a cool. It's one of my favorites. That
Mhm.
it's just to think you could sit there and make chip shots at 600 yards with a short action pattern AR is just unbelievable 25 years ago. Now but that cartridge, I knew guys, there was a large bench rest community in
Mhm.
Oklahoma and a bunch of doctors and, attorneys and all that, high income folks, right? That would have we had Steve Baldwin from Mechanical Accuracy. He's now retired, but he was building world class like F's the F class bench rifles, and those guys were constantly playing around with different calibers, and the 6 millimeter PPC, which is 220 Russian case necked up to 6 millimeter. Well, 220 Russian is the cartridge base for 7.62 by 39, which is the cartridge base for 6.5 Grendel. So,
Mhm.
but I remember a guy having one built in, he called it 6.5 PPC. And I was like, oh man, that would be a cool cartridge if it was in anything other than this 35-pound, you know, savage action with a barrel built around it. Man, that would be a neat cartridge. I also remember uh, JD Jones coming out with the 300 Whisper. And I remember reading that in American Handgunner. He had a Thompson Contender done up in it, and he didn't send the cartridge to Sammy or any of that. But I thought, man, I got piles of 223 brass. That would be a cool cartridge, And then fast forward, and AAC changed the cartridge dimensions a little bit, but effectively it's the same thing. Um, where I find, you talk about 300 blackout. Where I find it's really interesting is forget shooting at subsonic, because if you're doing that in a semi-auto, all you're doing is just adding layers of complexity. Uh, but I found the 110 to 125 grain bullet at 30-30 velocities, all of a sudden that cartridge takes on a whole new form. And there again, you can make your own brass. You can go buy the bullets. It's it's not overly complex to load yourself. And I got some really fantastic results. I have one in my safe that it's not suppressed. It's a 16-inch gun, and a 16-inch gun with 125 grain Sierra hollow point. All of a sudden, that's a hammer, and it's got some legs on it too. So that's where I really find it interesting. A lot of the guys I knew that got dove off into that cartridge, it was all about, well, I want to have subsonic ammo and supersonic ammo, and I want it suppressed, and I want this. And it's like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You got to kind of,
Yeah.
and if you look at the original intent, the military was trying to replace the MP5 with a gun that could do both. And that was kind of a flash in the pan. And then the
Mhm.
pig hunters decided, well, we mount a thermal and a can and it's quiet. Well, there's not a gun out there that's quiet enough to not spook feral hogs, as I've seen this movie a number of times.
Yeah.
Uh, so the subsonic thing, and then the bullet performance, if it's on something that you actually want to recover and not just wound and let it run off, then the bullet challenges get to be a big factor. With, well, I need a subsonic bullet that expands. So it every time you do something like that, it just adds another layer of complexity. And 300 blackout in a bolt gun is fun. Um, Ruger did the American Ranch in 300 blackout. I thought, man, that's cool, because now I can have a 20 plus round magazine on a short bolt gun with 110 grain, just screaming fast 30 caliber. So yeah, but man, the rabbit hole's getting deep today. Uh,
Well,
but
I would shoot the hogs with that 300 blackout, and when I was within its performance envelope on distance, and it all depended on which position that they put me on when I went out this was not hunting feral hogs. This was shooting. feral hogs. If this place was overrun, and depending if they put me in one of the short fields, 100 so yards was your maximum shot, man, you just lay waste to them with the 300 blackout. But if you got one of the bigger fields, getting out to 200 yards, and this is like broad daylight, no need for thermals, no nothing like that. They were just swarming, and I didn't realize how bad it was until like we go to meet up one day and we're standing in the barn, all gathering around talking before we go get in the ATVs and ride out, and the feral hogs run through the barn. We're standing in. This is how bad this place was overrun.
Sounds like
And
paradise. Uh,
oh yeah. And so I bought that 6.5 Grendel American Ruger American Ranch. This is the Gen 1.
hmm
And I called a lady at Ruger and sweet talked her into looking in the parts catalog. And she got looked up the part number for the compact stock because they were putting it on a 300, 350 Legend rifle, but they weren't putting it on the 6.5 Grendel one. So I bought the compact stock and dropped the action into it. So I have the 16-inch barrel with a 12.5-inch pull. I put a Vortex, a length of pull, put a Vortex 1-8 Strike Eagle on it. And man, you want to talk about we're on the way out to the positions and you jump a sounder that's running across the field. You can just hop off of the UTV and just start working that bolt at 1 power. And you drop 2 or 3 running across the field. And then you get out, get into your stand or your position, and then it's all right. Well, then I've got them at 200 yards coming in, and you just crank it up to 8 power and start whacking
hmm
them. And well, about 150, I was pretty good with that rifle. About 200, you were starting to exceed my capabilities with it. Um, better scope, everything. Probably would have been able to get out more than what I was getting. But
Yeah.
I love that 6.5 Grendel round. Um, and it's just a copy of an old Swedish rifle, a Swedish cartridge.
Yeah. If you look at 6.5 Creedmoor, it's been around
Yeah,
for what,
yeah,
120 years. 6.555 Swede. And my newest, my pig rifle that it goes with me. I just got back Friday uh, from a friend of mine's ranch, and he had set up. He's very frugal about guns. They're very tool based for him. Not a whole lot of vanity or any of that. And he's a gun guy, but he's not. He has no like real collector gun guy in him. And he had a 270 set up with a suppressor and a thermal, and I was like, why would anybody want that archaic 100-year-old 270? Like, what is that?
yeah.
And he had bought it just kind of on a sideways deal. And one night, middle of the night, and I watch him zap a coyote at 300 yards. And I go, what was your holdover? He goes, what are you talking about? I went, oh, the light bulb came on. And of course, with a thermal, you got to, it's harder to identify at distance and all that. But
Mhm.
he goes, yeah, this gun sighted 2 inches high at 100. Never heard that before, right? And he says 300 yards. It's only like 4.5, 5 inches low. Well, pigs 10 inches top to bottom, so I just put the crosshairs on and set it. So I went out and bought a Ruger Gen 2 uh, in 270 because somebody at Ruger, I think, is quite the hunter. They made a 20-inch barreled 270 that's threaded, which tells me they were already thinking ahead instead of the standard 24 or 26-inch barrel. So I went bought a can, did the thing, and everything I shoot with it with 130 grain American whitetail, which you can find in every gas station in western Oklahoma. They carry 270 Winchester, 130 American whitetail. And I bought a case of ammo for it, and it's the easy button. It you know, but there's no math with that cartridge. And I said, man, we've been chasing that maximum, that 300-yard maximum point blank in uh, short actions for 30 plus years, trying to figure out, 708 gets pretty close. 270's done it for 100 years.
Been sitting
And
around right there, right in front of us.
right, yeah. And people, but now it's a long action. So,
Yeah.
uh, but still, I go, how do you argue with a sub $600 gun in the Americans? And Ruger, for those of you that didn't know, they spooled up the Glenfield line. So they own Glenfield rifles. And they basically took the Gen 1 Ruger, which has been out of production a couple of years, and rebranded that as the Glenfield rifle, uh, which is a throwback to, the 50s and 60s when
Mm.
that was your go into Montgomery Ward's and you bought the off brand that was made by the big company or
Yeah.
contracted out. So, um, or Sears. So I thought that was pretty cool. Well, there again, what's old is new again. We're coming back around to, hey, that rifle was pretty successful. Let's not kill it. Let's just rebrand it and make it uh, not in the big flagship line to where it doesn't compete with the flagship rifle, but it's a little more approachable to a new hunter or something like that. So, um, but either way, there we go. It's like that cartridge is 100 years old, and man, it just flat works. Um, and it's funny, I had a conversation with Doc Miller, old Troy, the other day, and he coined a phrase. I put it up on Facebook earlier. He said, 30-06 is a whole lot like Cleveland, Ohio. I'm sure it's nice, but I don't really have a reason to visit. So,
Yeah.
because there's all the other cool stuff around it. But and then he and I both agreed, well, if I only had one hunting rifle, it would be a 30-06. But since I have the option to own a whole lot of other
Mhm.
stuff, I'm going to put a 277, a 6.5, something other than, or 7 millimeter, something other than just plain 30-06. And it's a really interesting the other interesting thing to me when we talk cartridges is if you look at the military's cartridges up until the early 2000s, they didn't do anything really well. They did everything acceptably. 30-06, 308, 5.56 or 223 Remington. But if you pattern off of that, if you go heavier, you get a advantage. If you go lighter, you get an advantage. But the 30 caliber platforms in rifles, just to me, they're kind of they don't do anything any better or worse. They're just kind of they're average. Um, and the exception to that, I think, is like 300 Winchester Magnum, which is another one of my longtime favorites. But heck, that cartridge has been around for what, 70 years? It's like, it's not new. And, and then we've gotten into the PRC cartridges. I thought that was going to be a
Mhm.
flash in the pan. They're basically non-belted Magnum cartridges that give a little performance advantage over the old belted Magnum cartridges. Um, but again, if you look at it, the concept's been around for like 100 years. It's nothing
Yeah.
out of the ordinary.
Or you can go all the way back to the late 1800s and the Spanish American War. We adopted this bolt action rifle in 30-40 Crag, and it has a cutoff on it to make it a single shot rifle. And if we're getting overrun, we'll flip the switch and we'll work out of the magazine because we don't want soldiers wasting ammunition and going nuts with all this whole what 10 rounds that they had on board. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I'm sorry, Cecil Birch, if I don't have the exact numbers correct. Um, but then we go right back to the '03 Springfield, and we're back into the 30-03, then the 30-06 cartridges. And it has always amazed me. The late '30s come along, and we decide we're going to go with this semi-automatic fighting rifle. And there's John Garand there, and he develops it. I think it was a 276 cartridge.
Like
And
276 Peterson, I think is what they.
yeah, and it's always amazed me. It's got that. It actually has a clip, not a detachable magazine. That's one time when the word clip is acceptable. It's got this clip fed action and everything. And I'm sitting there. I've always wondered. All right, we had the BAR, which was detachable magazine fed. Shortly after the Garand, we come up with the M1 carbine that is detached magazine fed. It's like, why didn't we put two and two together and make go to a detached magazine rifle then? All right. Well,
And
Garand is
then
ordered. Oh, good.
I was going to say, and then it wasn't until after the war they went, make the tweener with the
Yeah.
detachable magazine.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, but Garand's ordered to redo the Grand. And it's funny, everybody calls it the M1 Grand, but his name was Garand. Um, he's ordered to redo it in 30-06. And I guess from a logistics standpoint, it makes sense because there was all that ammunition out there um, already in the pipelines that was needed for the bolt action rifles that were in use. It was ammo that could be swapped back and forth because you got to realize at the outset of the World War II, weren't enough M1s to go around, and so you still had your fighting units that were sent in to the early battles of World War II with the bolt action rifles. It made sense to have the 30-06 as the common round. But just think about where we would have been if back then they'd have said, no, we're going to go with this intermediate cartridge in an attachable box fed magazine. There would have been the M1 carbine. Um, you never would have had the M14. You never would have had any of this other stuff that came along. And we have been searching for the answer to that question for decades because now what if all this, the blackouts trying to get back to 300 blackout? We need something more than 5.56. All these other cartridges, we need to get something more than 5.56. It's the 6 millimeter has been the answer the entire time. And what are 270s, 276s? They're all basically something in the 6 millimeter platform.
Yeah. And the the 270 Winchester, if you look at that 276 Peterson cartridge, which never, I don't know that it ever made it really beyond prototype phase.
Mhm.
It died on the vine pretty quick. You're talking a semi-auto version of 270 Winchester.
Yeah.
Pretty close. I mean, maybe not as fast, uh, but still, in a long action cartridge. So fast forward, the Army is playing around with 277 Fury, the SIG 277 Fury. Well, if you look at it ballistically, they've taken basically a short action bolt gun or the
Mhm.
large action AR and replicated 270 Winchester. Almost like Jack O'Connor was right the whole time.
Yeah.
but but when I saw that cartridge come out, I was like, well, here we go again. They just made it shorter and fatter and called it something different.
Mhm.
Um, it, it's, but it blows my mind to see, yeah, dudes, 100 years ago, they kind of figured that one out. And I've always been like a big fan of like the medium bore stuff, which brought me full circle into 35 Whalen. 10 years ago, I was looking for the ultimate hog hunting rifle. I was like, needs to be a bolt gun, needs to be magazine fed, needs to have a intermediate variable power, 2 to 7, 1 to 5, one to 8 was like a rocket ship back,
Mhm.
unless you were jumping in a night force or something like that. Um, and I land on a 1 to 4 Vortex Crossfire, which is like a $250 gun. It's not, but they punch way above their weight. I've got like 3 or 4 of them now, and I took a Savage and they had a clearance on some Savages in 338 Federal, which 338 Federal's 308 Winchester necked up to 338. So you can run a 200 grain bullet pretty hot. Well, in the midst of all of that, while I'm putting this rifle together, I end up getting into 3 or 4 sounders of hogs with a vintage Remington 788, which 50, 60-year-old rifle, carbine, 18-inch barrel, 7 millimeter .08. So it's neck down 284, and it has a detachable magazine. It's a 3 round box, and they're not great.
Mhm.
But I'm like,
That's
well,
all the
here I
shots you're going
am,
to get off anyway.
right? But here I am chasing what I have in my gun safe,
Yeah.
and the medium bore, I wanted to be above a 200 grain or above bullet at somewhere around 24 to 2600 feet per second. And I put that rifle together. I customized it. I ordered 10 round box magazines from Savage, um, because I looked at .358 308. I just typed that in the computer one day, and 358 Winchester popped up. And here I am thinking I had a brilliant idea. 358 Winchester. Nobody commercially produced one for like the last 25 years. That rifle, it's set over on, or that cartridge is set on the sidelines. And now that 35 Whelen is on this big uptick, people are now starting to look at short actions on that 35 caliber. And Ruger this year pulled at my heartstrings with the 350. They relaunched the 358 Winchester 77 Hawkeye short action with a control feed. And I was like, oh, then I have to get online and look at express sites and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'll just wait. I'll just wait. But there again, that's what led me down that rabbit hole. And if we go back in history, I mean, 358 Winchester came out in like 1952, not far off the heels of 308 Winchester. So, or 7.62 by 5.1, whatever we want to call it. But and somebody's going to go, oh, but they're different. Okay, got it. But uh, and then 35 Wheeling, right? I'm a big fan. Love it. Uh, it's it's a hammer. It's 200 grains at 2750, 2800 feet per second out of a 20-inch barrel. It's fantastic. Um, 350 Remington Magnum was a short action belted Magnum cartridge that all it did was mimic 35 Wheeling. So this concept of long action, short action performance and chasing long action performance in a short action is nothing new. Um, I pity the guy that, before they belted that case, blew up a number of Remington 600s trying to get 35 Wheeling ballistics out of it. But and then the 350 Remington kind of spawned some of the Scout rifles. Cooper, the first one he had built up was in 350 Rim Mag. So it's nothing new. That was, gosh, I don't even know how many years ago that was. I got to look at how old 350 Remington Magnum is, because uh, it's
It's funny that you bring up Cooper and the Scouts. Buying that 6.5 Brindle American Ranch that works off of the detachable box mag was kind of, and putting that 1:8 scope on it,
Mhm.
was kind of where I settled. I wrote a 4-part series called Down the Practical Hole, where I was trying to, what is the modern practical slash scout rifle? And that was my answer. And
Yeah,
I'm in that whole setup. Gosh, I forget what the Gen 1 ranch is sold for. It was like $400.
they were sub $500.
Yeah, sub
And
$500. And then the Strike Eagle 1:8 full
they were
retail was 300 or something like that, I think.
yeah, when they launched, and
Yeah,
it wasn't very long after that they went way up.
yeah.
But
And I
yeah,
got into one of those on a pro deal. And so I'm at less than $600 in this rifle. And I'm having a blast with this thing. It's doing everything that I need. And it's like I don't see the need to go into all this high end stuff when this moderately priced, mass produced rifle and this modest scope pretty much satisfy every need that I had.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think the industry has. We're seeing that turn kind of like we saw post World War II, where you would kind of have, the Sears, the Montgomery Awards, like I
Mhm.
said earlier, but the companies are kind of doing it to themselves. And the reason being is they've started to produce such good stuff at such an approachable price point
Yeah,
that uh, you know, and I first ran across it with Savage with the Model 10s and the 110s. I was like, man, these things punch way above their price. And then they got expensive. And then my varmint rifle to this day is a 223 Mossberg MVP precision, or I can't remember what they don't make it
yeah,
anymore. But it's the same concept of a V block action that Ruger used in the American series. And my stepson, Eric Jr., I got him for his like 11th or 12th birthday. Me, his dad, some other guys kicked in, and we got him a Ruger American Gen 1 in 6.5 Creedmoor with the compact youth stock. And the reason we went 6.5 Creedmoor, recoil is pretty manageable. You can go 120 grain and it's a youth rifle. You go 143 grain and it's a long range rifle that's, you know, bought him a case of 143 ELDX and he has been on a hunting tear for the last, 8, 9 years. That's his hunting rifle. When I was a kid, it was the Remington 788. You didn't want to be carrying a 700 BDL or something around that had a ebony forearm cap and all that, right?
yeah,
Your dad wasn't gonna let you drag that around the bushes, or
yeah,
Winchester 70 Super Grade or something. Like you got the budget rifle, but for a lot of years in the gun world, a cheap rifle was that. It was a cheap
yeah,
rifle, and now they're inexpensive. So they're great. They're just inexpensive. Um, and it's interesting to see now that they have that formula together with good, better, best. And Ruger does that really well. The Glenfields are good. The Gen 2s are better. The 77 Hawkeyes are the top end, and also very affordable for how well they're made. And they do a control feed action on everything. It's like, hello, Remington, Winchester. You remember when you used to do those? It's a thing. Um, so you can get a kid into, or a youth into a really accurate, affordable rifle, and then as you go up in the tiers, you can get into some kind of more odd calibers. And then when you go to the 77 series, you can get into all the classic calibers, 35 Whelen, 30-06, 270. Um, so it's a cool time, but I often speculate that is really born in the industry's board, or the
yeah.
consumer side of the industry's board.
Both, I think, both.
Yeah.
And to that same line you were just taking, if you're an AR guy, well, then there is an AR compatible version of all of those rounds, and you just get another upper and bolt and drop it onto the lower that you already got, and you can pretty much meet any rifle needs you're gonna have.
Yeah. And the AR thing, I thought it had played itself out. And at SHOT Show this year, I figured out no, companies are still investing heavily in them. I mean, Ruger just brought out two rifles that if they had been out 15 years ago when I pieced the gun together because nobody made what I wanted, and I wanted a free float tube with M-lock, and on down the line. Uh, a mid-length gas system with a 1 and 8 twist barrel to me is the magic combo. And I don't need a carrying handle, but I want the option, and all the things. Um, and Ruger released some like sub $600 rifles that are that. There it is. And the
Yeah.
two price points that are like $75 a piece with those, I think they call them the Harrier rifle. And I'm sure next year they're going to be in every caliber you want. So,
Yeah.
uh, but that was kind of neat. Like, and Smith and Wesson, the M&P line's been around forever. Um, but yeah, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't approachable. 2006, 7, 8, when that first started, the tech first started really coming into the uh, consumer market. Because prior to that, man, the AR platform, even in gun friendly states, was kind of viewed as those are, they weren't as socially palatable as a bolt gun. Um, and even today, there's some stigma with it. But I think as the caliber lines have expanded and the cosmetics have changed a bit, some of that they've gotten a little more, you know, approachable, so to speak. Which and I find that dichotomy pretty interesting. That after World War II, like an '03 rifle or a Garand or an M1 carbine, nobody. I don't think that really had the social stigma like it did, you know, post Vietnam. So, and I don't know I don't really know how to distill that into, why did I guess best I can surmise is the public wasn't a big fan of Vietnam. So
Yeah.
the rifle that got associated with it just kind of got, eh. Well, the M14 was there too, the M1A1. You know, there were Remington 700s there. There were Winchester 70s there. There were revolvers there. But none of the other ones caught the stigma that
Yeah.
um, the M16 AR-15 platform did. So, and it's only been in the last maybe 10 years that the stigma for the buying populace has really gone away. Maybe 20 years, it's really subsided, but the social stigma around it is still very, very high. So, um, because what does an AR do that an M1 Garand doesn't,
Right.
or an
Well,
M1A1, or
yeah, the lever gun was the American rifle for decades. And everybody attributes, it's the good guy rifle, the John Wayne rifle. Well, everybody that was shooting at John Wayne in those westerns was using a liver gun too. So it was also the bad guy rifle back then as well. Um, but grandpa, dad, uncles, they all had Winchester 94s or the Marlin equivalents or whatever. And that was what was viewed as that's an acceptable rifle. You look at, the area you're talking about coming back off of Vietnam. Nobody's father and grandfather and uncles and everything was traipsing around with AR-15s. And one of my cousins that I grew up with bought, and once we got old enough, he bought an AR rifle and he bought an AK, and he showed up with those one day, and I just thought, oh wow, yeah,
like,
what is
can
this?
I touch it?
Yeah, like can I actually see that? But now everybody's father and uncle and grandpa, they've got an AR pattern rifle sitting around, and it just doesn't have the stigma that it did back then, or it doesn't either the stigma or the fascination
Eh,
that it did back
yeah.
then.
One of our mutual friends who now
Mhm.
lives in Georgia, he his dad still local to me. He
Mhm.
calls me. He's like, "Hey, can you help my dad out with this free float tube?" He's 73, 74, and he's shooting competitions
Yeah.
with a modern service rifle. I'm like, "Oh wow, that's having never owned one prior to that." But and you're talking about lever guns. When
Mhm.
I became a cop in 2002, the only patrol rifle school in Oklahoma was a lever gun operator school. And I remember, like, I was I was hedged to you can have an 870 with slugs, but your slug can't be the first one loaded in the gun. Whatever rule, right?
Right.
Um, so I carried an 870 with a whole bunch of buckshot, and I carried a Benelli Super 90 with one round of buckshot and a whole bunch of slugs because the Super 90 you could reach out and touch somebody with a slug. So,
Yeah.
but that was my having lugging two shotguns because I can't have a patrol rifle. So what's the next
Right.
best thing? Um, well, I can remember dudes from the not necessarily rural, not as rural as you would think,
Hmm.
sheriff's offices because Oklahoma City borders 5 counties, and guys would have a 94 Marlin or a 336 Marlin or a Winchester 94. I'm like, huh. And when they spooled up our patrol rifle school, a bunch of the cadre had to be trained on ARs by a guy that was a certified rifle instructor for lever guns. Here's the curriculum you wrote. Now sign off on us and teach it to us. So, in the
Hmm.
grand scheme of things, and that's changed. The dynamics changed, but now with some of the social stigma surrounding ARs, even here in the Midwest, there's been a large uptick in people wanting to go to lever gun schools. And here's the other interesting piece of that is when I got on the PD, I could find 336 Marlins for, in 3030 for like 250, $300.
Yep. Try that now.
ARs were up here. Well, now anybody can find an AR for sub 500 or less dollars. Go try to find a 336 Marlin for that. Well,
Yeah.
when I got into the patrol rifle and instruction and all that, you know, even like a nice Colt or a Daniel Defense or the Bravo Company wasn't even around, but some of the better made ARs were still $1,000+
Yep.
so it's cool to see that has like completely shifted. And uh, I actually loaned my 18-inch Marlin 357 to Daryl so he could go through a lever gun school with it
Hmm.
here. And then we made some phone calls to try to get him a trapper, a 357 trapper.
Hmm.
And dude, one, I got sticker shock, and two, I couldn't believe the lead time, even though we have some industry connections that can,
Hmm.
well, we'll get one made and get it out to you guys, right? It was like 3.5, 4 months before he could even touch that gun. And when I talk to the guys in the industry, they're like, man, we can't make lever guns fast enough. We can't make specifically Marlins. So and they're making them better now than I've ever seen. I've seen ebbs and flows in quality when it was under Remington or it was under this or what, and people are looking for JM stamps on barrels. And to me, every one of those was made by hand, and you know,
Hmm.
was it a Monday morning gun or a Wednesday gun or a Friday afternoon gun? There's now, man, every single Marlin I took, they're all made exactly the same, and the quality wise is like top notch. Smith and Wesson even jumped into the lever gun game,
Yep.
and I have with my 1854 stainless 44 Magnum Smith and Wesson, I have shot an inch or less at 100 yards multiple times with that gun. That was unheard of 10 years ago.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
um, so yeah, that's cool.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you a funny shot show story. I walked in to go eat breakfast with some of the Smith and Wesson guys, and Jerry Mitchellek was there. And we don't know each other well, but what we have. And he looks at me and he goes 357, and he's like waiting for me to respond. And I go 44 Bain and Davis, 357 40. It's just bottleneck 44 mag
Hmm.
down to 358. And he goes, see, other people know about that cartridge. And it was just funny to have that. I'm like, yeah, I've known about that cartridge for 30 years. It's neat. Um, but we were talking about, man, I wonder if we, if Sammy would approve it, then we could spool one of these companies up to build lever guns and then factory ammo and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
regardless of what, the industry is doing, those conversations are still happening all the time. And that's sometimes I think that's how this stuff reaches the consumer end. Like probably a couple dudes that are 35 Wayland fans that want to go on a pig hunt with a shorter, lighter rifle that work at Ruger went, man, we ought to make some 30, 358 Winchesters. We ought to just make a run of them and see what happens. So, so that's cool. I'm glad that the industry is bored enough that those conversations start happening rather than, hey, are we going to have enough bolt carrier groups to make this run? Or
Yeah.
so, anyway.
Well, I'm gonna step back into the Wayback Machine here for a minute. Um, I was in the eighth grade. I may get a little emotional here. Um, I'm gonna step back a little bit further than that. My father had a first cousin that they were 3 months apart in age, and they grew up inseparable. Um, very, 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 very close. And lived 2 miles apart. You know, I grew up every Sunday. We were all together. Constantly. Um, so in the eighth grade, my father ends up um, goes to a doctor's appointment. They take him from the doctor's appointment straight to the hospital. He has open heart surgery and doesn't come home for 2 weeks. During the middle of all that, I'm 14 years old. I'm left at home to take care of everything. We had three mares that were due to foal any day now,
Oh,
etc. And so I'm taking care of all of that. And my father's first cousin showed up every afternoon, and he would just stand around and watch me taking care of everything. And after about 3 or 4 days of that, he didn't show up anymore. He said, "I guess he's got it." Not long after that, uh, I shot a deer with a Mossberg 600 12 gauge. And I called that cousin and said, "Hey, could you come help me pick up this deer and skin it out and all that kind of stuff?" And my father still wasn't in shape to do any of that. And so he comes and gets me. We take the deer up to his place, skin it out, all that kind of stuff. And we go to get back in the truck, and he's going to take me home. And there, sitting in the passenger seat, is a Glenfield Model 30 and 3030.
wow.
And he says, "Your daddy and I have been talking about this. Um, Take that rifle and use it. I'll tell him you're ready." And to me, that was a coming of age thing.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
like the elders of my tribe have decided that I'm ready, and
You
I
were
kept
worthy of
that.
center fire rifle.
Yeah, uh, and it was the only centerfire rifle in the house back then. 'Cause Daddy believed you could solve every problem with a 20 gauge and a 22 and a 38 revolver, and so I traipsed all over the place with that Model 30 and 3030. And then that cousin had a daughter that was 3 or 4 years older than me, and she got married, and her husband wanted to go deer hunting. And so he's like, "Hey, you still got that Glenfield?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, give it to Paul so he can go take it out and deer hunt." Well, I haven't seen the rifle or Paul since.
Mm.
Because my cousin cut him loose not long
Oh,
after that.
no.
I've not seen either one since. And so this point in time, I'm like a junior in high school or so, and I've got a job and I've saved up some money. And my daddy takes me to a little pawn shop there in town, and I bought a Marlin 336 in 3030, and I still have that rifle. And that has been my rifle since I was a teenager. I bought it myself with my own money. That's it. Uh, Decades later, I'm doing this cop thing, and I, for some reason, just had no interest in the whole AR platforms and the AKs and all that kind of stuff. And I had been to multiple shotgun schools. And so I think it was Katrina happened. I was like,
Yep.
well, I better start, you know, what if something like that happens around here, some sort of societal collapse and everything? I probably need to be more prepared than what I am. And so I go out to the local gun club and take my 336 Marlin and 3030 that I've had since I was in high school. And I start playing around with some of the techniques that I've used to keep a pump shotgun running. And lo and behold, they translate pretty well over to the lever action rifle. And it's like, I didn't feel the need to go buy the black rifle because I could figured I could handle any problem that would pop up with this rifle. I did ultimately buy a Yugo SKS because I walked into one at such a crazy price I couldn't turn it away. It never made it past the garage into the house, and eventually I got rid of it. Um, I ultimately got into ARs because my agency adopted them, and I had to learn how to run the AR because I was going to be teaching it. But still, those were work something. This lever gun was my thing. Well, long about 2012 or so, there's some big gargantuan, horrible, tragic event happens, and there's all this push with the gun control and everything, and everybody's convinced this is the time that ARs are going away. And I just happened to stop into a gun store one day, about an hour from my house, and I walk in and I look, and there is nothing on the shelves remaining that's box fed except for class three stuff that you couldn't just walk out of the door with that day. But I walked over and there was a rack of used lever guns in this shop, in the 250 to $300 range. Some of them are pretty beat up and whatever. And I said, you know what? I'm going to offer a lever action patrol rifle school. And so I put out a big flyer and everything. I got hate mail over that. I had one guy just incensed, sending me all kind of nasty grams. You're going to give people the impression that a lever action is a suitable patrol rifle. Well, good. That's exactly what I'm trying
Because it
to.
is.
That's exactly the impression that I am trying to give. And it's funny on the other side of that, I had people that that I'd never even heard of sent me copies of Cooper's commentaries and talking about the Brooklyn rifle and all that kind of stuff. You're on to something. This is what he did back then. And that's how I kind of became the lever action guy. And, and it's funny, a couple of years ago, Chris Costa did a lever action rifle class for somebody. And the internet was like, the first lever gun class. And I started getting everybody like tagging me. It's like, it's okay. It's all right. Just let it go. Um, but that's how my whole lever gun journey began, was in the eighth grade. I got in the pickup truck with my cousin. He's like, here you go. Here's a lever action rifle. You're going to make it. And to me, that is, yeah, to me, that's still what rifle means. Um, Unfortunately, we went through the whole, fiasco that was the industry of Remington buying Marlin and killing it and everything that went. I think the rifles that Marlin is putting out now, pretty good dang rifles. But the price point of them is so high that the whole game has flipped back around to stuff we turned around. We've already said. Now it's the opposite. You walk into the gun store where here's some nice new lever guns for $1,200. Well, here's a very serviceable AR for 600.
Did a 180, man.
Right. And the AR is easier to put an optic on. It's easier to put a light on. It's easier to put a sling on. Um, and then, quite frankly, around here, your choices in lever gun, which to me, lever gun means 30-30. I know they're in other calibers, but to me, that's what it means. You really don't have an intermediate. You either have 30-30 or 45-70, and there's not really anything in between unless you start to get into some custom stuff. Now, I know Marlin tried to do like a 308 lever action cartridge and everything at one point in time, but
That was in the death throes before
yeah,
Remington. And
yeah,
but from that, You want to talk about oddball calibers again? 338
Yeah.
and 308 Marlin Express
Hmm.
and 307 Winchester came out. And those are incredibly serviceable cartridges that are
Hmm.
in that intermediate range. But my thoughts about but in that era, man, lever guns you couldn't give them away.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, he's moved to Montana, but he bought a 338 Marlin Express when it first came out. And he goes, "This is a short action 30-06 with about a 300-yard range." And I went to Steve Baldwin, and for my buddy's birthday,
Hmm.
I had ordered JP Enterprises sold a blank footprint for what we now know as the Leopold Delta Point Pro. He had ordered an early one. It was a Leopold, I think it was just called a Delta Point, uh, mini red dot optic. And I had Steve Baldwin mill that down into a plate and put Marlin pattern countersunk screw holes in it. So he had a receiver sight for his 338 Marlin Express that gave him a 2.5 inch offset like an AR.
Hmm.
So a 5200 zero. And he still hunts with that rifle, but he was one of my buddies that was in on the original AR rifle program, and he's like, "There is nothing we are doing here that can't be
Yeah.
achieved with a 357, a 44 Magnum, a 41 Magnum, a 3030.
Yeah.
There's nothing we're doing right here that can't be achieved with one of those cartridges." I'm a big fan of, again, intermediate or medium bores. So
Hmm.
357 18-inch Marlin with a 180 grain bullet doing 1850. That's a solid intermediate. That's a another reason I don't shoot 357 Magnum handguns. Period. I don't feed any of my revolvers 357 Magnum because it's a rifle cartridge pretending to fit into a revolver. Um, it's a perfectly good waste of a rifle cartridge, if you ask
Yeah.
me. Um, but lever guns. I'm with you. At 3030 always kind of escaped me, but I got one.
Yeah.
I got one in there that I cut down before Marlin made trappers. It's in that Cabela's safe, and I need to have it reblued. It's I stripped it down, cut it from like 21-inch barrel to an 18.5, and me and my dad, that was one of our first like home gunsmithing projects. And it would give you an example. You talk about lever gun prices in 2004 when 2005, everybody was looking for ARs, and it was getting to be Rock River and Colt. Like you couldn't find a Colt, and all these dudes are like, "Man, we don't have a patrol rifle program, but things are getting spicy." I just put out an MDT message or something, or I said, "Anybody got a 336 Marlin 3030 they want to part with?" And a buddy of mine sends me a message back because I got one in my trunk, $200, and I'll even give you the ammo. And it's a pre-cross bolt safety, uh, and it was a beater, man. But I was
Yeah.
like, "Hey, why not? I mean, there's nothing I can't do with that." So yeah, and I have one of the new Ruger Marlins.
Hmm.
I got in on a special buy for an organization I'm part of that got Ruger to make a run in 45 long Colt or 45 Colt as we
Yeah.
and that's a pretty formidable cartridge when you pump it up a little bit and stick it
Yeah.
in a lever gun. That it's just like 357 mag, You
Yeah.
you get into the line ball plinking load and stick it in a Marlin, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's like 4570 short, which there's debate about it, but it's interesting because I peeled the gun
Yeah.
down, did action work on it, and I was looking at all the machining and fitment, and I was like, oh, this from the factory is awesome. It just needed a little polish in a few places to make everything kind of run a little slicker, and it is superbly accurate. These new lever guns, I think barrel steel now is better because man, they shoot great. 3030. I remember, hey, a 2-inch group at 100 yards, man,
Yeah.
if you can see that far, you're doing well with the old buckhorns. Well,
Hmm.
now you slap a Skinner receiver sight on that thing, man, they come to, or XS or whoever, they come to life. And then I've got a Winchester pattern in 454 Casull from Rossi that has to go back. I was shooting it recently and I was like, man, I think the front sight's drifting over. And it wasn't, the barrel was twisting. that's how shoot. That's that's how hot that cartridge is. So
Yeah.
uh, I called our good friend Caleb and I was like, hey,
Yeah.
I was shooting some spicy stuff and the front sight went like this, but it wasn't the front sight, the barrel. So, but I've been a long time fan of lever guns.
Hmm.
I never got into the operations side.
Yeah.
Um, I think the first TAC was it 2019 TACCon when you put on the first social lever guns class?
Uh, I did it at one of the ones in Arkansas. So
Oh,
it
at
would have been
Darcy, yeah,
16 or 17. And then I did it at the one we did in Louisiana.
yeah, the New
But
Orleans
once
one.
once we moved to DPC, you can't shoot rifles there. So I haven't had it there. Um, I've got a 336 youth model
Mm.
in 3030 that's got a 16-inch barrel. The metallurgy on that one is so bad that after about 5 rounds, it's so hot you can't touch it, which would be fine for, taking your young and deer hunting with. Go shoot a couple of rounds through it to make sure it's sighted correctly, and then go a lifetime of shooting deer from a stand, and that rifle's going to be fine. Trying to use it for any kind of like a patrol purpose, social purpose, whatever, the metallurgies on it is too bad for that. But you give me so like one of the modern made Remingtons, or excuse me, Ruger made Marlins. Now they're missing the boat. They're still putting those two long stocks on it. It needs to be about 12 and a half or a 13-inch length of pull. Put that on it, put a fore end on it that has an M lock slot on it so that you can put a light on it. Uh, Make a receiver mount that you could put an acro on and give
Mhm.
me a 16-inch barrel. And I'd be just happy with that as a patrol rifle.
Well, my 357 has a micro H2
Yeah.
on a Ferrotech mount. Ferrotech makes a receiver mount for Marlins.
Okay.
They're about $80. They're pricey, but
Yeah.
and other pro tip, that new Vortex shotgun optic,
Mhm.
that it's like a enclosed emitter optic with a real long mount. Works
Yeah.
great, fits great on a lever gun, and it works
Oh, cool.
fantastic.
Cool.
And then Ferrotech started making an acro mount. I just cannot bring myself. The only one I have that I want to do put an optic, or the only other one I have that would be available for an optic is that 45 Colt. And I can't bring myself to take the polished brass Skinner rear sight off of it and drop an acro onto a 45 Colt. I think that's kind of
Yeah.
like it's dropping a V8 Hemi in a Model A Ford or something. I just
Yeah.
there's something in my DNA that will not
Yeah.
allow that. The 357 now I'm like, okay, but 45 Colt and part of this package that we ended up buying into,
Mhm.
they come with the two-piece brass and steel
Mhm.
polished blued Skinner peep rear peep, and I was like, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it to that guy. That's how it came. I just can't bring myself to do it. Um, and then the 1854 is my modern lever gun, and it's effectively a Marlin mashup of a 94 and a 95. So if you get a big action Marlin, they have a tubular bolt or round bolt, and you get the 94, the scaled down action, they actually have a square ish bolt that rides in raceways. Well, the Smith and Wesson, it's like they scaled a 95 action down, which is cool. I mean, it works great, but it's in 44 Magnum and it holds all the BBs, man. It's got a full length mag tube. Put 44 specials in it, and you can shoot that thing for like a week and a half before you got to reload it. But that gun I actually mounted. It comes with a Picatinny rail, so I used a American Defense mount and a one of those 1-4 vortexes, and that rifle it'll reach it. I was gonna put a dot optic on it, and then I realized, wow, that will reach out and touch something. So,
Yeah,
and when you can, Steve Shields at High Desert makes kind of a rifle-ish load for 44 Magnum. I wouldn't shoot it in a Smith and Wesson. I cracked a couple of them through Ruger Blackhawks, and they're spicy. But it's a 265 jacketed flat point that does 1850, or no, I'm sorry, it does 1800 out of my lever. So that gun's sighted in at 100 yards. Like that, that is my, and I have a suppressor mount on it, which again, since it's a modern gun and it has an
yeah,
M-LOK forend, or there's
mhm,
M-LOK slots for a light. I don't mind going down the
yeah,
modernization with that.
right,
Whereas if it's got walnut and checkering and it's blued steel as they should be and were intended to be,
yeah,
that those get peep sights and a leather thong wrapped around the actual lever because you know you don't want to bang your knuckles
yeah.
up.
Some of the stuff I see out there in the lever gun market now basically defeats all of the um, social advantages of having the lever gun. Now, if it's something you're taking to the woods to shoot hogs with or hunt with and everything, I
Yeah.
can see going synthetic. And matter of fact, the old 336 that I bought back in high school, I ended up the bluing on it got in bad shape, so I ended up having it parkerized in all
Mm-hmm.
black. And Ramline used to make um, synthetic stocks. And so I
They
put
did.
the put a Ramline synthetic stock on it and had a local gunsmith cut it down to 12 and a half inches and put a recoil pad on it. And it is just absolutely perfect. Now, I do like the Magpul stock. Unfortunately, they're not making their forend in a M1 for the 3030s yet. And I just have no need for a 4570. But just one last thing on the lever guns, because ever constantly I get questions about them. Um, in my experience, if you take one that's in 357 and you start trying to run 38 specials through it, you might have some feeding issues. Um, you need as long and as a pointy bullet as you can get away with for them to feed. You start getting into anything that's like really round and blunt, you start having some feed issues. Um, get people ask me about Henry's, and when I first developed my liver gun program that I was offering, I always borrowed Henry's from the classes originally because Henry's did not have a side loading gate, and I actually got a nastygram from the Henry company over that one time, and Henry then put side loading gates in them. So I started, well, yeah, bring them. Those have really cool features that you can like twist off the magazine end cap and dump all the rounds out, which I like. Unfortunately, the only of the Henrys that I've seen the trigger on it was so ferocious that it was just unusable. Um, I haven't played around with any of the new ones, but one day I may just do one in one of these new Marlins and see. But
The the Henry
mm,
stuff, Oklahoma, the guys that were
mm,
teaching lever gun classes were on the same track. Like, hey, if it doesn't have a side
yeah,
loading gate,
yeah,
uh, it's not that it's not usable. It's just not
yeah,
usable in this framework.
right,
And but a lot of them still discourage the usage because the triggers, and I've done some trigger work on them. They're not much
mhm,
different than a Marlin, so you can improve them pretty good. The only other thing, and I don't put them in a category of hard, fast use, right? Like
yeah,
going and multiple rounds, hundreds of rounds a day, like we do in
yeah,
police courses. But
mhm,
for a newbie that wants to play around with lever guns. I think they build a quality product. I just
Yeah.
in the framework of like a hard use patrol gun, I don't
Yeah.
think they're quite at the level that like Marlin, Smith and Wesson, and Winchester are.
Yeah.
But they also do some very cool cartridges in the
Yeah.
Henrys that they don't do in anything else.
Yeah.
So I look at those more of like it's a hunting gun, it's a recreational gun, but I would hesitate to put one in a patrol car as they are right now.
Yeah.
But there again, how a $400 AR, how many of those do we watch crap the bed when they're in a
Yeah.
hard use, high volume course? So it's the same concept, you know. I have buddies in law enforcement that'll really bag on people. Oh, you got a Palmetto or you got a Arrow Precision home built gun.
Hmm.
Well, I've built a lot of super accurate recreational hunting use AR, like modern service rifles on those cheapy kits
Hmm.
that will shoot under an inch at 100 yards. But it's not like we're out there on a PRS course
Right.
shooting 100 rounds a day. You know,
Right.
you're shooting at a feral hog. Okay. If the gun craps out, oh well. Um,
Yeah.
I had a friend, he's still in law enforcement, love the guy to death. He sent me a picture of a cracked YHM bolt, nickel boron coated bolt. This is why we buy Colt. And I said, how many rounds were through that rifle before that bolt failed? Like 50,000. I go, and you're disappointed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Just go ahead, buy a Colt. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
wax intellectual about how much better everything else is. But that guy got 50 cases of ammo through a rifle that was under $1,000, and you're mad that it failed. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And after I framed it up like that, he's like, "Yeah, maybe I should kind of temper that a little bit." Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But there again, I mean, I've seen some of those budget rifles go; they do just
Hmm.
fine. But anyway, and I like the Henry rifles. So don't get me wrong; I'm like not trashing them.
Right.
Um, when they released that first brassy 4440 and 45 Colt and like all the vintage cowboy calibers with no forearm and the actual like tubular magazine that
Hmm.
you got to be like extra careful with the loading gate and all that. But I was like, man, finally somebody's building a gun with some class. And
And just for fun, which is
yeah,
okay.
why not? Hey,
Yeah.
I got a three-screw Ruger single six sitting over here. There is no reason to own that gun for anything tactical
Yeah.
or high volume. But
Yeah.
just for the love of shooting, it's fantastic. So,
Just a couple of lever gun tips for those that are listening. Keep your screws tight. That will make a huge difference. The last lever gun class I taught, uh, after we did all our intros, I had everybody go around with a screwdriver and tighten up their screws. And at lunch, we did the same thing. And that's the first class that we've ever made it through that we didn't have a gun start locking up on us.
mhm.
Daryl's, like Brockman, worked over a gun and less than 40 rounds locked up on us in a class once because the screw backed out. They're not built for sustained fire. That is not what these guns were designed for. You're pressing into a roll that it wasn't. But go out there, run a few rounds through it, run a couple of drills through it with it every so often to maintain your proficiency, and you're cool. Um, the Marlins, you will wear eventually. You'll wear a groove in the carrier with a lot of hard use, and that will start leading to what's called the Marlin Jam. And folks, that's not a problem with the design. It's never going to show up in a lifetime of deer hunting. It only started showing up when cowboy action shooting got popular. All right. So don't worry about some of those things. Just mitigate them. If you start having feeding issues, maybe look at your carrier and see if it needs to be replaced. Now, it's a quarter of the price of the rifle to replace it, unless you get it
it's
welded up somewhere.
it's cheaper to have somebody with a pulse
Yeah.
arc welder TIG it
Yeah.
back up.
Yeah. But you can make these rifles work. You don't have to have the latest and greatest in the fancy black rifle to defend yourself with one. And Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here? We've been going about an hour and a half.
Oh wow. Um, Man, the gun industry in general is kind of slowing down to the pre 2008 levels. So
Yeah.
if you guys like your local gun shop, you like to see the new stuff come into your local gun shop, go vote with your dollars. Um, there are a lot of good rifles. There are a lot of good revolvers. There's a lot of good. I don't know of any really bad semi-auto pistols right now. There's some I don't prefer, but there's a lot of good stuff out there, and the prices on them have really, you know, they've gotten to a point I don't think they can make them any less expensive. So with manufacturing cost, uh, so I if I drop into the local shop, I try to walk out with a box of ammo or a sling or something. So
Yeah.
save your communist coffee money and put it back into your local gun shop and any I'm not a big fan of indoor ranges, but if I got to go zero a gun or something, go support your local indoor range and kick them a few bucks once in a while. They're all of these. If you want these places to be around, you need to vote with your dollars, and it's getting ready. I see 2026, 2027 taking a very, very big slowdown, um, which is, you know, my dad had a shop in the 1980s. It was a struggle, a retail shop. So, go support your local mom and pop shops, and that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, Smith and Wesson, we're now 45 days past the quoted delivery date on the pistol that I ordered. Just needed to bring that up. I told the dealer to send them an email so that I was going to change my order to a Glock Gen 7 because it might get here faster. And so
I
just had to work that in. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I may be able to help you with that. Send me some names. Let's
All
see what
right.
we can do. I will say this about Smith and Wesson. Right now, there's another company that's falling out of favor rapidly, and there's a lot of market share that opened up. So they are doing their due diligence to try to get the market gap covered, and that's a real thing. So some of the combinations of guns are kind of,
Yeah.
if I can make you one with a multi optic plate now versus a specific plate later, they're really making sure that all those people that keep us safe are getting serviceable duty guns. So, not making excuses for them, but that's
Yeah.
that's where a lot of emphasis is going right now.
Well, I'm going to mention it in every podcast until they get it. Now that we're past 45 days late, it's uh come on, Smith, get it to me. When models that you introduced at SHOT Show are showing up at dealers, and one that's been in your catalog is I can't get. Hmm. And Brian, thank you for jumping on. We planned this in like 5 minutes and he got on it and
20. It
recorded
was
and
a
made
solid
it
20.
solid 20. Uh, and we got on board and we made it happen. Appreciate you taking some time out of your Sunday afternoon. I hope you can avoid doing laundry for the rest of the day. And to the audience who know that your most important asset is your time, thank you for choosing to spend it with us.